Today we're working on the garden tractor. It's a John Deere 322, and we got to repair the tiller here. Last year we were using this thing and we found out that the bearing was no good there. So knowing that, I went and got myself a bearing ready to repair this thing. So as it sits there, you'll have your that's the drive end, which will be splined into the drive right there. And then this is your primary tiller. And then you've got your connecting rod there. It's going to be pinned in to this one, goes through the body there. That's where the bearing will be. And then it'll be pinned in on this little extension. And then, so you remove that extension, get that off of there, take your pin out. You can remove this off, and then disassemble your bearing. And when you disassemble your bearing, then you can pull this shaft out and this tiller out for the drive. So the way that shaft assembly is you're gonna have a tiller on this end, and that's your pin to pin it into the tiller. And you have a tiller on this end, and your bearing assembly is in the center here, and it is attached to that body. So this is what we had left of the bearing. There's nothing left here, and this is obviously seized on that shaft, so we had to cut it with the grinding disc, and then we try to get it cut as close as we can to, we don't want to go through and hit the shaft if we can, and then kind of spread that open with a chisel or a wedge or something like that, and slide that off of there. So this is the inside race, or what's remaining of the inside race, and the collar. It's just all welded into one piece here of the bearing. This is the outside portion, and obviously nothing for the center. So that bearing goes inside of here, and I have another one to kind of show you. So this is what the bearing looks like new. And so this bearing will go inside this kind of clamshell housing. So it fits inside there. And then you're gonna have your bolts here, and that's gonna bolt it onto the body of the tiller. So basically your bearing assembly here is going to bolt up to the body of the tiller on this side, as that's the way it was when I disassembled it. And so what we want to note is this space right here and the body. So there's a space there. That space that we were talking about is taken up with these two little spacers here. So if we take this, and the table's representing the body of the tiller, and this is basically our half of the housing, then it's going to rest up against there, and those spacers take up that space. So anyway, this thing, it's obviously all chewed out. This is the other half here. There was no bearing left. It chewed this out. It basically wore grooves into the shaft, so I kind of welded that up to get it back to size, and turned it down. You can only turn this down so much, because your bearing inside bore has to fit over the shaft, right? So we try to keep that as true as we can. And I was on my way to go get another housing, and as luck would have it, I went to Princess Auto, and I found these bearing housings here. So I feel this is a much better design. That's going to rest flat up against that housing, the plate on the tiller there. And the thing to note here is that the bearing that fits inside here. So this is the replacement bearing from John Deere for this application. That's the part number. And for the make and model of this unit, it's a John Deere 322, and it's 1994. So when we get that factory bearing, we measured it out, and the inside bore is 1.248, which equates to roughly 1 1/4. Now, I could not get that bearing size at the Princess Auto that I went to. The bearing that they offered was 1.185, and that was inch and 3/16. But what they explained to me was the bearing sizes, the inside bore from 1 1/8 to 1 3/16 as they had at the store has the same housing. So what I did was I brought my bearing into the store, right? Put the sticker on there. I brought my bearing into the store to see if it would fit inside the housing, and it did. So that was a win. So I got 2 bearings and 2 housings. And then the other thing too is, if you could tell, I've got a mark on there because this bearing has this little hole here. Well, this one has several holes in it, but this one only had one. I only had one hole in there, and I lined that up with the grease point so that you can grease this bearing. It's going to be to put a bearing on either side of that tiller plate there, and then this is going to, and then make access so you can grease it as well. And in my opinion, this is going to strengthen that up quite a bit. You'll have to figure out the bolt circle for your pillow block housing here to fit on there, and drill those holes out. And in my case, it was 4 5/8 inches for the distance of the bolt circle here. So we got everything loose here. We haven't tightened down these bearings yet, and we slipped the shaft through both these bearings, and then there's this collar, and it goes on there and it locks it into place. That's just going to lock it onto the shaft, tighten it down with a set screw. But right now we got everything loose on this side, and again on this side. So we're going to put a little grease on our shaft there, and then we're gonna slide our drive end with the splines. We're gonna slide that on. Now that we got the shaft onto the drive there, we're gonna come over to this other side, and this is where we're going to push our shaft through and engage it into this end of the tiller. So with our pin put in there and our shaft completed on both sides, this is actually pretty good. Problem is though, this bearing on the outside, for the design that they had with this bearing on the outside here, the shaft only came out a little bit, and then the pin's got to go in there. So basically, if you wanted to just put the one bearing on this side here, and then put this back to factory, you're golden. I'm gonna see if I can still make this work with the 2 bearings set up, and build another shaft to pin it here. Here we are with the final installation. We've got it in fairly tight on the drive side here. We got that pillow block bearing on this side. What I did was I left everything loose on for both the bearings. I built a new shaft, a longer shaft, to accommodate for this bearing here. I also built this spacer just in case this coupler lets go, this lock. Then there's a little bit of clearance here, but that should keep it so it doesn't come apart. Also too, we've also got our locking pin there. I also had to turn down this end one so that when it's on there, it'll fit on. And when I built that shaft, I drilled and tapped the center just in case you had difficulty pulling that out of there. You put an eye bolt, or you could use some kind of puller or something like that. And then I just put a bolt in there, tighten that up, just in case that hole compromises the strength of the shaft. So my locking pins are just 1/2-inch bolts. The bolt that goes in here, I welded the nut on there, so you'll slip that on the shaft, you'll screw it in tight if you want, And just as after you screwed that in tight, also got a hole here for the locking pin. So we'll throw our cultivator on here. So that'll go in there. This is gonna, you'll tighten that up, and you can put your pin in when you're done. So here's the final result, and it actually looks like the tiller matches the same width of the rear tires. If we come in closer, we can see those pins that I put in there, just 3/4 bolts. 3/4 bolts and nylon lock nuts on the bearing housings, and then up here we've got 3/4 bolts. There's 3 on the top, and then there'll be another 2 underneath here to bolt this side piece on there. So everything will be 3/4 socket to remove everything if you need to. And yeah, so we got a bearing on both sides, and I think that's going to strengthen it up really well. And then we shortened this end here. I think that's also going to make it stronger as well too, because basically it's driven from that pin. So I think it'll be a pretty good improvement if anyone else out there wants to try out something similar.